All across America and around the world, this is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including rss.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us, whether it's on your mobile phone or your computer or your laptop, your tablet. But listen in to Veterans Radio Podcasts. We post something new every week, and you're going to find it informative.
We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Elliott James Rattner, a Navy veteran. Elliott, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we were talking a little ahead of time. You check a few boxes we haven't talked to on Veterans Radio before. One of them's a linguist. We'll talk about that. And another is your transition from being enlisted to being an officer. That's kind of interesting as well. So let's start with this. How did a nice Michigan State University grad end up in the Navy?
Well, I graduated in 2012 into a recession, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I actually joined the Navy for the linguist position. I was like, oh, wow, they'll pay me to learn a language. I'm such a huge language nerd. I was very excited. I shipped out November after I graduated, and
was your undergraduate in linguistics or in Arabic? What was that kind of a pathway?
So actually, I was a psych major, as is everybody who doesn't know what they want to do with their life. I was a psych major, but I received a scholarship to study Korean through MSU, and I thought that when I went to the Navy, I'd continue doing Korean, but they offered me Arabic, and I couldn't pass up a chance to learn something completely new. So
now did you go into the Navy as an officer, or were you enlisted?
I was enlisted at first. I enlisted as an E3 because I had college, and right after boot camp, they sent us to Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, which is where they do all of the linguist training.
And how long is that program? I don't think we talked to anybody who's been in that program on Veterans Radio, but it always shows up in the novels that various people write about spies and nefarious activities. So tell us a little bit about what it's like to be at that Defense Linguistics Academy almost.
So first off, it's beautiful because it's in Monterey, California. But as an E3, it's also impossible to live off of an E3 salary because it's Monterey, California.
Right.
But the programming and the amount of time that you're there actually depends on what language you're going there to learn. Um, uh, Arabic is a year and a half. So
And
you
I assume
are
there's sort of like proficiency, you got to keep I don't know, is it every 3 months or 6 months? You got to be showing progression towards fluency. Is that how that works? And if you don't, you go peel potatoes or something?
almost exactly, except not necessarily every 3 months. So we would have unit and tests, but at the end of the program where you're told, you need to be at least at a working proficiency in a year and a half, or you're going to the fleet undesignated, basically. So it's a fire hose, right? You're learning a language at a fire hose pace, and then you have your fluency test at the end of your language course, however long it is, and you end up doing a yearly proficiency test.
At the start of a program like this, that's a year and a half, how many folks start the program and how many actually finish the program for, say, Arabic?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't have specific numbers, but I know we lost probably 6 people in our class, and oh gosh,
What'd your class
across
start with?
probably in the 30s, maybe
Okay.
less.
So,
They're small classes so that you can get the most out of. Um,
so that's kind of a 20% washout rate. So again,
yeah, it's very high.
yeah, it doesn't surprise me at
It's
all.
not buds, but
Yeah, right, right. So, okay, you pass through the Arabic linguistics course. You're proficient. Now, what's the Navy do with you?
well, they sent me down to Georgia.
Where all the Arabic speakers are. No, why did you go to
Right.
why did you go to Georgia? And what is there a base there that you go to, or is it now you're kind of working in a different segment of naval intelligence or something?
So it is naval intelligence. It's through do a lot of work through the NSA. I can't really talk,
Sure.
about the work that we do there, but I ended up working kind of you know, administrative control under the Navy, and then operational control was under the National Security Agency, first in Georgia and then up in DC.
So it's somewhere on this path. Now you're in a couple of years or more, probably more. You get transferred up to DC.
Yeah, so first I was transferred to um, Fort Meade, Maryland, and then um, I was there until I commissioned and moved to DC.
And again, the work you're doing is as a linguist, you're either reading documents or listening to things, and translating them. Uh, and are you at this point still working kind of hand in glove between the Navy and the NSA, or are you detailed off somewhere else?
So at this time, I'm still, um, under uh, dual control.
That's interesting. Again, I don't think we ever, unless you're in that position, you never get to peek under the tent. So I'm sure veteran radio listeners would like me to ask more questions that would peek under the tent, but also could get us in trouble with the NSA. And
Right, we
I have no
no
desire to do
specifics.
that. I have no desire to do that. So as you're going through this, is the because you re-enlisted, right? I mean, the Navy's kind of hidden the marks for you. Tell us a little bit about again this MSU student with a psychology degree. Why do you re-enlist?
I loved the Navy. I felt really directionless before, and I, I felt kind of like the underdog. I feel like a lot of people in my life, when I said that I was joining the Navy, I think a lot of people were like, Psh,
You're not going to make it,
you're not gonna
kid.
like it, you're not gonna make it. And I absolutely thrived in the military. I really embraced I mean, everything about it. You will never be able to experience anything like the military without being in the military. I mean, it's like learning a new culture. It's learning a new language, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it's crazy.
I was on ships, so I have some appreciation for sort of the bonds that you make with folks when you're all in miserable conditions and the storm's going and the food's horrible. And you haven't had, back in my day, you didn't have mail for a month. Was part of this is the linguistics uh, units, are these pretty tight, almost insular groups?
They are it's a very small community. Um, and so the people that you work with, you're probably going to be working with most of your career. Uh, I It's interesting because a lot of linguists don't end up deploying a lot because of our dual nature. Um, of course, there are people that do direct support operations, but I was mostly shore duty as a linguist.
Yeah, I mean, that specialty lends itself to that as compared to being on a ship, obviously. Um, so you do this, I think you said, for about 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Is that two or more reenlistments?
I re-enlisted in 2016 and then 20 oh gosh. It was two re-enlistments, but I don't remember what the second one
Well,
was.
I'm trying to get to the
Wait,
point
no, I think it was only one because I think I was coming up for a re-enlistment.
because I'm trying to get to the point where you decide I'm going to stay in and go to night school. Now we haven't talked about this yet, but that's where you get to, right? You're still in the Navy, enlisted, being a linguist, and you decide to go to night school. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And
So
and what in the world made you think you want to go to law school?
that's a very complicated question. I I mean, I grew up I mean, you know my dad, so my dad is an amazing attorney and he was always so passionate about the law and you could just see that he loved what he was doing. And I loved the Navy, but and I loved being a linguist, but I I saw what he was doing and how he was helping people, and I wanted to be able to help people. As a linguist, it's interesting because number one, you can't come home at the end of the day and tell your family what you've been doing.
True, true.
The things that you are doing, you're so far removed from the end result that it's hard to feel like you've achieved anything. And the other thing was when I was starting to go to law school, it was 2018 that I started. Um, there were a lot of civil rights movements and big issues coming up that um, that I wanted to be a part of and wanted to make a difference in. And I thought that, the best way to make an impact and to help promote change, positive change, was through being a lawyer.
So it's a real commitment to go to law school for anybody. And try to go as you put your hands in your face, and it's agonizing to think about those first year or two. But to do it while you've got a full-time job. Now, fortunately, you have shore duty, so you can kind of pull this off. But I don't think a lot of people realize that education is something military service supports, expects, whether it's professional education or outside here, you're going to change radically your career. But talk a little bit about those challenges to be both a full-time Navy linguist and then taking on the burden of law school.
Absolutely. So I was very lucky that the shop I was in, we call like um the places you work, your direct
Yeah,
workplace shop.
yeah.
I don't know if that's something that needs explained, but your shop, my shop at the time was not um it was not shift work, so it was pretty consistent day schedule, which was very nice. And I had a very supportive commanding officer. My chain of command knew that, this was my goal, and I was applying at the time for the JAG Corps in process procurement program. Basically, the program enlisted to officer. It is the holy grail of programs. The acceptance rate is less than Harvard Law. Um, it is basically, you apply, you get selected, you go to law school full time while you're, in civilian clothes. You just have to show up for PT, um, stuff like that, and then you get commissioned directly after that. However, I did not get picked up the first three times I applied because, as I said, it's easier to get into Harvard Law than get picked up
Well,
for the
and
program.
that's part of the story here is that you don't give up. You keep moving forward, and it's pretty unusual for an enlisted guy to move through that eye of the needle and come out the other side as an officer uh, because you have all this enlisted time and experience. So, was third time the charm or the fourth time the charm?
Fourth time was the charm. Um, I there was so the year before I got selected, I was going to put in a request, but at that time there was the first Trump trans ban, and I know we'll get to that later, but um, I wasn't I wasn't sure if I'd be able to stay in at that time, so I didn't apply the year before I got selected. Um, and we can,
So let's get through graduation. You graduate now. Now what's the Navy do to you?
well, as well, to backtrack just a little bit, as I was in law school, I was working in Odenton, Maryland. I was living in Glen Burnie and I was going to school in Baltimore, so I lived kind of equidistant between them, and it was in person until COVID. Um, so my command had to be very supportive of, okay, they moved me to admin. I ended up being the commanding officer's administrative assistant, so that I could do that work and also work on my law school, and that was incredible. And of course, I had the GI Bill to put me through. So, thank you, Navy, for my law degree and not being
Exactly. Well, I used
swallowed
to
in
yeah,
debt.
build a bit mine back in the 80s, I guess. So same story. Glad to have it available.
Yeah, so it was actually like 2 months before I graduated that I got the call that I had finally been picked up for the JAG Corps. And I cannot explain the sound that came out of my mouth, but it was one of the happiest days I've ever had. I was so excited.
Yeah, because you've gone through all that pain of law school, and the bar's going to come, but all that pain of law school, and you don't know if you're going to go back to being a linguist or whether or not you're going to get into the JAG course. So that had to be just overwhelming and a powerful relief that now I know the path forward.
Absolutely. And boy, do I feel silly now thinking law school was the hard part.
Well, you get into the JAG Corps, you get commissioned as a lieutenant, This is about 2022 that
Yes,
you're commissioned and you're in JAG and
2023, January of 2023, because I had to pass the bar before I was able to commission.
okay.
Um, and I had wrangled this sort of, I wouldn't say deal with my triad, but I had combed through a bunch of instructions and found that if there is a program that benefits the Navy, you can be put on administrative leave for up to a certain amount of days, paid administrative leave. And so I was able to negotiate how my studying for the bar would apply as administrative leave. So I think it might not have worked if my triad was not so supportive, but I
Yeah,
was able
yeah.
to
And
take.
every law student on the way to the bar takes 60, 90 days. You just study and you only want to take it once and it's the worst thing in the world. So
Is the
you
worst thing
get
in the
through
world.
that, you get commissioned, you're a lieutenant in JAG. What do they have you do to begin with, and where do they say they're going to send you before you end up separating in I think it was January of 2025. So what do you do in that window of time?
So I actually separated in April of 25.
Oh, okay.
But I when I first got commissioned, they sent us to Officer Development School in Newport, which cannot compare to the hell they put the OCS kids through. But I still remember some of my classmates being like, "This is so hard. This is the worst thing ever." And I'm like, "You're not getting
Well,
pepper sprayed. You're
yeah, let
not
me tell you
getting.
about it. You're not being gassed. You're not
You
being
don't
sent
have
to the
the
fire chamber.
you don't
Yeah.
have to do the peanut butter shot. You guys are living the life." Um, but yeah, so I went through that and then I went back to DC. I got orders to the Navy Yard in DC, which was the place that I really wanted to be. I had done a couple months as an administrative assistant at the Navy Yard in the legal office. Um, I think in 2017 when I was applying for the JAG Corps. Um, and so I wanted it to be kind of full circle. I wanted that to be the first place that I was stationed, and I was very blessed to have that opportunity. I came back for a couple months between Officer Development School and the Naval Justice School, and we got a wonderful apartment. And then we went to Naval Justice School for 11 weeks up in Newport again.
So there's I keep forgetting how many training programs they always send you to before they turn you loose. Um, but let's I'm going to change the dynamic here a little bit because along this way, you have a major transition in your life because you enter the Navy as a woman, and by the time you get to the JAG Corps, you're a trans man. Do I have that time frame about right?
Yes, so I I came out as transgender in 2020. Um, and that was right around the time that the first Trump administration had um, put out a ban on transgender people um, joining the service and seeking any sort of medical assistance in transitioning if they hadn't already started. It was originally going to be a full ban, but uh, the lawsuits at that time were able to um, kind of factor in this grandfather clause that protected people that were already openly serving. And I was
So
not.
that's what I was going to say. Your transition was sort of later than that. So walk us through how that worked and how it impacted your naval career. That's a big question, I realize.
It is a big question, but I think it actually has a very wonderful answer that also later, ends tragically, but gets better. It's hard to say because, all right, I came out in 2020. I had struggled with a lot of issues that I, a lot of, I had a lot of mental health issues that I did not realize were related to, crippling dysphoria, the misalignment. Uh, it's really, you can't understand it unless you have it. And I think that's where a lot of people, um, you know, a lot of people might think that it is a mental illness in of itself, and it's not. But you wouldn't know what it feels like to be incongruent with yourself if you didn't have it. And I remember once I finally came out to myself, I knew when I was 12, I came out, did not get a lot of support at that time. And so I kind of was like, oh, well, just kidding. I guess that was silly of me to think. Um, and so fast forward to this point, I come out, I finally feel like myself, but I'm also having to hide myself from work. Um,
You've been
and
in the Navy for 8 years at that point or so.
yes, about 8 years, and really loved being in the Navy. I was in law school. I was in my second year, and I was able to socially transition in law school with a lot of support. The people that did know at the time in the military were also very supportive. And at this time, I had applied twice to the JAG Corps and failed. Well, not failed, I just wasn't accepted, right? It felt like a failure to me. But, and then I didn't apply that year because 2020 because I didn't if I wasn't going to be able to, transition, I couldn't stay in. And so fast forward to I think it was 21, January 21, one of the first executive orders that then President Biden had put out was allowed open service for transgender individuals. And I remember I was sitting at my desk in Maryland and just sobbed. I was so happy. And I was afraid at the time that as I was coming out to people in the Navy that they would be unsupportive or hateful or judgmental. Um, a lot of trans people face that, but my experience, I had a lot of love and support from the people in the military, not just my peers, but my leadership. Um, I ended up after being true to myself, after transitioning, I got picked up for the JAG Corps. I became as myself too. I was openly transgender in the application process. I was picked up with them knowing I actually became the first openly transgender individual to be commissioned to the Navy JAG Corps. And of course, openly is the key word.
Sure, sure.
Um, and it was such an honor, and it felt like the timing was perfect that I had found myself and then I had gotten my goal.
Well, and part of this story is I think there's an image that everybody in the military is a bunch of blah blah blah, and they would not be supportive. But you'd proven yourself up. This was about whether or not the guy could do the job.
Yeah.
And you'd proven to your peers and your command you could do the job, and that seemed to be maybe the critical issue, really.
Yeah. And have always I was always really in love with the fitness program through the Navy. I was a assistant command fitness leader for almost my entire career, and then when I commissioned as a JAG, I became the command fitness leader. Held one of the highest, physical fitness scores. I was the head of the suicide prevention program, the sexual assault prevention program. I had my fingers in all these things and made sure that I was performing at the highest caliber that I could. Um, I feel like people who are in a minority group always feel that pressure that they have to outperform their peers just to get the same amount of respect. But I think it also shows that not only are trans service members capable of doing, the bare minimum standards for service, but can actually surpass that and be operating at the highest level.
And as you transitioned, you're talking about fitness standards, and I want to maybe just underline this point. Your fitness requirements as a woman were different than your fitness requirements as a man, and you still were at the highest levels.
Yes,
Did I
sir.
have the story right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So again, I didn't want to belong
And
to the point.
and my scores prior to transition. I tend not to say as a woman. I just say prior to my transition, um, I was still performing at the male high standards. And I think, not only does that show that women are, capable of high standards, but also that this discourse around, you know, trans people and athletic performance doesn't really matter. It shouldn't be a question.
So I want to, before we run out of time, I want to talk about what happened in your situation, but really happened, and there's some statistics that say there was something like 4,000 people with gender dysphoria diagnosis serving active duty or on National Guard or reserves. I don't know if that number's right, wrong, or indifferent. But when the Trump 2.0, I guess I'll call it, comes in, and Pete Hegseth becomes the new Secretary of Defense slash War. They changed the policy that President Biden had put into place, and that jeopardizes your career and all the careers of these other folks. Talk to us a little bit about that phase of life.
Absolutely. So as soon as the election results came out, everyone already knew that this was going to be um, a hot issue. Um, yeah, we knew that it was coming down the line. We didn't know what it would look like, if there would be a grandfather clause like last time. But when the executive order came out in January, I don't know if you've read the executive order.
I'm not, and this is January of 2025, correct?
Yes. I will not pull it up and read it because the language is so hateful. Um, it it frames trans service members as people who lack honor and integrity, um, very, which is just false. I mean, you have it, if you search the amazing people, the amazing trans service members who have come out about their stories, these are pilots, these are doctors, these are people that have deployed to protect their family and their country. It just it's so insane. But we had to wait for, so the executive order came out, and so we knew that there was going to be a trans ban. We didn't know what it was going to look like still. We didn't know how they would be identifying trans service members. We didn't know anything. We didn't have a timeline. And there was the lawsuits that got launched, and they fought so hard. And we ended up getting a couple preliminary injunctions, but they did not hold. And then, of course, the injunctions were lifted. And so, um, first, and so I saw the writing on the wall. I knew, everyone knew because I was very out about my transition. And I mean, so I knew that I needed to switch gears. I knew I was not going to last. I needed to make sure, I had a job because I have a husband. I needed a job. I needed a place to live. I needed to figure all this stuff out. So I ended up, uh, my commanding officer helped me actually push through a resignation right before, the shit hit the fan, for lack of a better word. I ended up resigning my commission just in time because when the injunction was lifted, um, the new regulations were having trans service members use the grooming standards of their sex at birth. So you had trans women having their heads shorn off, or
Oh boy.
their hair shorn off.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
trans women were having their hair shorn off. People were not allowed to say sir or man, or to call a trans man sir. Um, if their sex at birth was female, they were told to call ma'am. Commanding officers were told that if they did not report one of their sailors was transgender, they would be in violation of UCNJ. They were going through people's medical records to find out, having people report on their physical health assessments. Um,
so really, it's a horrible transition. One of the things I guess I'd like to know is, I assume that when you resigned, you got an honorable discharge.
I did.
And can you broaden that statement out as other trans have service members have left? Are they getting honorable discharges?
So I got an honorable discharge on my resignation. Um, I know that in the instruction, it says that transgender service members who are separated under the instruction are to have honorable discharge unless there's anything that can give them something otherwise.
Right.
And you better believe that there have been commanding officers that have gotten people for the smallest things.
I want to point this out to folks because at this point you've had what, uh, 12 years or so in the service.
Yeah,
Uh,
almost 13. I wanted to retire. I
and
was going
and
the full 20.
this is where you're at and most vets would get this. Maybe those listening to veterans radios who aren't veterans wouldn't, but it's important to have that piece of paper that said I have an honorable discharge for my VA benefits
Hmm.
earned through those 13 years of service. So that's kind of why I'm asking that question, trying to tie up that end for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a JAG, I did a lot of admin boards where you have to tell the people who are deciding whether to retain or separate the sailor how is their decision on the characterization recommendation going to affect this service member,
For
and
life,
it
for life.
follows them for
Yeah,
life.
it
Yeah.
follows them along. Well, Elliott, we've used up more time than I asked you to hold for me, but I kind of thought maybe that would happen. There's a lot to this story. Um, and there's a lot we're not talking about because we have time constraints. But I really appreciate your candidness and honesty of coming on Veterans Radio and talking about both your military career, but this transition in your life and how it ultimately impacted that military career. So, Elliott, thanks for the time today.
Thank you so much for having me and for letting me share how amazing trans service members are.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by visiting us at veteransradio.org. That's veteransradio.org. We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Legal Help for Veterans, a veterans disability law firm with a national practice before the VA, can help you on your claims and your appeals. It can be reached at legalhelpforveterans.com or 1-800-693-4800. Charles S. Kettle's chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America, that's Chapter 310. VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, the American Legion Irwin Preskin Post 46 in Ann Arbor as well, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and certainly the National Vietnam Veterans of America Association. You can be a sponsor by going to veteransradio.org, clicking on the About Us and our sponsors, and help us out. Keep this program alive for the 21 and 22 years. Keep us going for another 20. Thank you.